Win big in 2023 with Team Sync from RotoBaller. Import your fantasy teams and sync your leagues. Get customized tools and tailored advice for your specific rosters and scoring settings, including live recommendations from the Live Draft Assistant, Free Agent Finder, and Lineup Optimizer. Sync an unlimited amount of NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL fantasy teams from all of the major fantasy platforms. Get a discount for any premium pass using my promo code KNUCKLER, KNUCKLERRIP to Tim Wakefield. Just visit rotoballer.com/radio. Start rotoballing like a boss. It makes a great gift for Christmas for that rotoballer in your life. And this podcast is also brought to you by Parlay Play Fantasy Sports. Get in those parlay player prop pick'em contests. Use my referral link and my referral code RotoBrady. Cash in on those sweet, sweet deposit bonuses. Thank you to those people. They have a great product, a lot of fun. And what's up, everybody? This is Brady Grove bringing you another special interlude episode of RotoBaller's official MMA podcast, Tap That. Follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. Real quick, follow the podcast everywhere on Facebook, Spotify, YouTube at Tap That MMA Podcast. But if you followed me in the spring, you know that I am way big into the alternative football scene. The XFL, the USFL, there's been nothing but news there. Then the ELF, the X League, Arena Football. There is no shortage of high-level professional football out there. And with me today, coming to you from the Lawrence Technological University up there in Michigan, and he is now the quarterback of the Obic Seagulls. Give it up for Tyler Kulka. Tyler, thank you so much for being here, man. We've been talking for a while. I'm so glad we finally get to do this.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me, Brady. So good to be with you.
So, Tyler, first of all, I know you're from Michigan, and Lawrence is an NAIA school up there in Michigan. Ultimately, from the path of high school to college, what ultimately brought you to Lawrence Tech?
So for me, actually, my story is kind of crazy. So from high school, I went to Chippewa Valley, which is a big school in Michigan. Still one of the top 10 teams in Michigan right now. Still a very big high school. And so my senior year was actually kind of crazy. So I played the first 3 games, actually played very well. But we ended up losing 2 of those games, and I ended up playing middle linebacker. So it was actually my senior year. I ended up playing middle linebacker for the rest of my senior year and actually did pretty well at middle linebacker. And, my dream was to always play college football. That's what I always wanted to do. And before the season, before my senior year, I went out to BYU football camp and actually won MVP of the camp. And, they were looking at me during the season and stuff like that. And then I ended up playing linebacker. So then they were like, oh. So after that, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go on a 2-year Mormon mission. So I went on a mission for my church and was one of those guys in name tags, knocking doors, teaching people about Jesus, and actually had an amazing experience. Ended up baptizing 4 people, and it was awesome. And so my plan was, BYU was interested. So my idea was I was going to go walk on at BYU. That was my plan. I didn't have a scholarship offer because I didn't play quarterback my whole senior year, but they knew who I was, and that was kind of my plan. And then I got to say, for me, I feel like God kind of leading me to Lawrence Tech. I think 2 months before I got home, I got a call from the head coach. They were starting football at Lawrence Tech. They wanted me to come be a part of the first 45 and basically be the quarterback for the team. And so I ended up going there and, having a great career and being the starter for 5 years.
That's an amazing pitch that Lawrence was able to make to you, starting something brand new and giving you the opportunity to get in kind of on the ground floor for a program that's kind of close to home for you.
Exactly. Yeah. It ended up being a perfect situation. It was perfect. It was 40 minutes away from home. So far enough away that I was, had my own space, but also at the same time, like I could go home and see my parents, and my parents were able to come to all my games, and my family was able to come. And it was almost a perfect situation.
And, who knows how that could have ended up differently, right? Because BYU is a quarterback university for sure. And
exactly,
it's a lot of strong competition too. And it's a different environment when you're playing in Provo. Obviously, that's one of the best home environments in all of college football. But,
I agree.
You never know too, because their quarterbacks often play a little bit more of a different style. Some of the last few guys have been pretty mobile. What do you think that do you think that starting off at Lawrence, it gave you the kind of the ability to play on a college team that was a little bit more tailored to your strengths as a quarterback?
Well, I think, I would say for me, like my skill set, it started off as, we ran two different offenses at Lawrence Tech. So I was able to get a little bit of everything, which was awesome. I got, the first 2 years was very pro style, Michigan State type of offense. Literally my head coach coached at Michigan State before, coming over to Lawrence Tech. And then after that, it was very RPO spread style, RPO, a lot of RPOs, things like that, and which was, more tailored to my skill set. But I feel like I really learned a lot going through that. And but you're right. I mean, going to BYU, they did a lot of running, they had a lot of mobile quarterbacks with, Zach Wilson and Taysom Hill and stuff like that. But it's interesting. I feel like God really put me in the place that I needed to be successful. Because to be honest, if I would have went to BYU, I would have walked on. You never know what would have happened. But at the same time, I was able to go start for 5 years and get a lot of experience and be able to actually play instead of, just sitting on the bench and stuff like that. So I would say, like, I wouldn't trade my experience for the world.
And you can tell that you played in, two different offenses in college, because watching film of you playing, you make good reads. You are able to, read different levels of the field. You're not afraid to dump it off on short distance. You're not afraid to go deep. And at the same time, like, you're definitely not afraid to improvise too, because I feel like the film that I've seen, you seem to throw well on the move.
Yeah. I like to mold my game a lot after I get the comparison a lot to a Baker Mayfield, just with my size and the way I throw the football. But, I actually tried to mold my game a lot after Patrick Mahomes. I played baseball growing up. I actually, was funny, during college, I would play slow pitch softball in the off season, and I played shortstop. So, I actually got a lot of the off platform throws, the off schedule throws, the sidearm things like that. So, I feel like I try to mold my game after those guys. So I would say that helps me a lot in the long run to be successful in any offense.
And so, spending your career at an NAIA school that, was building their football program from the ground up, how would you describe, the football fandom culture at that school and just the overall strength of the program and where it's headed in the future now that you're no longer there?
I mean, I would say I hope I laid the building blocks for a successful program. I think the biggest thing that I want to leave, that I felt like I left with my legacy there, was my dedication and hard work. I was out there every day. In the summer, I was throwing 3 or 4 days a week with my receivers in the summer. It was, for me, I hope that the legacy that I left was, basically the field rat type of mentality is what my coach always said. That he always talked about. Kobe was that gym rat who was always shooting in the gym. I think I wanted to leave a legacy of being important. What's important is working with your receivers, gaining that timing and stuff like that. So I felt, hopefully I left that legacy. And then fandom wise, I feel like we had to build that. Before that, it was kind of a soccer school. So it was crazy. Our first game, we had a ton of fans. It was actually, we didn't have the stands built yet. And so we actually had to turn people away from our first game because the stands weren't built yet, which is kind of crazy. So, I feel like, we built that over time. And, I hopefully these next few years, Lawrence Tech, is going to be put more and more on the map. So hopefully I laid the building blocks for a successful program,
Well, damn, man, the first quarterback in the program's history ends up carving out a professional career for himself pretty early. So you got to think that it's a pretty good start for him. You said something earlier about your time at the end of high school and how you went to that BYU football camp and you were the MVP of the camp. And it's those camps that a lot of high school talent ends up getting discovered either by big programs or small, regardless. And so, if you could talk a little bit about kind of what those camps are like and, what people are looking for there, who's there, and, what are some things that could cause you to fall through the cracks in some of those scenarios?
Well, I think those camps, there's always so many people, and that's something I would say, and you have to do something to stand out. But I will say, when you go to those camps, you have a lot of people that these quarterbacks and things like that who are stepping on people's toes and trying to steal reps from people and stuff like that. And it's funny because it's surprising, but college coaches actually notice that, and they don't want those kind of people in their program. So, it's almost like, these college coaches know what they're looking for, if that makes sense. So when you go out there, when you get your reps, they're looking for, how does the ball come off your hand? This is quarterback specifically. They're looking at your footwork. They're looking at, how does the ball come off your hands? Things like that. And you can go out to any camp and ball out. And honestly, if I'm talking to a high school player right now, I would tell them to go as many camps as you possibly can. And then at the end of the day, you gotta hope that the right coach is gonna find you and want and believe in you, because that's the biggest thing. I mean, I look at my brother who is playing at Wayne State right now, and he went to the camp at Wayne State, and he went to quite a few different camps at Michigan State and Michigan and things like that. But at Wayne State, the coach literally noticed him and was like, that's an NFL talent. And I'll be honest, when I look at that, I'm like, you just gotta find the right coach. It doesn't matter what kind of ball you play. It doesn't matter D1, NAIA, D2. If you have a coach that believes in you and knows that you can be like something special, that's what's going to make you the most successful as an athlete.
And isn't that amazing too? Because some coaches don't care. And
Yeah.
those year after year. And it's crazy in this era. Every high school quarterback, high school football player, athlete, they have a Twitter account. They're on Huddle. They're on Instagram. You have more practice with dealing with people and in promoting yourself now than ever before. And yet there's some out there, and it's usually some of the higher ranked prospects up in the 4 and 5 stars that don't seem to care how they deal with people, and that reflects in programs year after year.
It does, and it causes a lot of programs. I mean, you look at I don't know too much about the guys, but you look at a program like Michigan State, who was on the top of the world probably maybe 5 to 7 years ago, and now you look at them and they're struggling, and it's tough to see. I'm a big Michigan State fan. I've always been a big Michigan State fan, and you wonder what it is, if it's the type of players that they're recruiting instead of focusing on the character of the players,
or the character of the head coach, for example. There
you go.
Like that's the thing too about those camps is some guys, some people are able to catch lightning in a bottle just as head coaches are able to, and I think that sometimes it leads to a lot of players getting, oh God, I don't want to say overvalued, man, but it's just, there's a lot of scouts out there that are ranked. There's so many high school football players out there.
Exactly. Yes.
To evaluate somebody on a weekend of work is crazy. And then to announce them as, this guy's going to be the heir apparent to Cam Newton at Auburn, that's just an example in my head. But, it's just crazy, the opportunities and yet the limited windows that you have sometimes as a prospect to show out.
Exactly. Well, and the wild thing about those things is you don't know if that guy just had the day of his life. Like, you don't know what he's at his average, right? And that's the crazy thing about some of these camps. You could have a guy that balls out, but his average isn't all that great when he, with accuracy and albeit things like that, And so some of these 5-star, 4-star stuff like that, it could be just he went to one camp one day and just was the best one there and balled out and did his thing, and you never know. So there's so many high school athletes out there, and I think for a high school athlete, I think you just got to go out, put yourself out there, go to these camps, and look for that opportunity. Because to be honest, if you go somewhere where a coach believes in you, you're going to be successful as an athlete.
And consistency can be the name of the game, and steady improvement. It's not about the qualities that make you I think so many players get evaluated on in 8 years, best case scenario, this kid could be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. But at the same time, you got to evaluate people on their actual performance. And you, sir, at Lawrence Tech, 3-time all-conference honors, I believe at different levels. I think one was an honorable mention, and then steadily moved your way up and led the conference in passing. Ultimately, you threw 78 touchdowns in your college career, only 37 interceptions. You threw 66 and 62% completion percentage for your final 2 seasons, improved your average yards per game steadily from 275.6 yards per game to 286.1. And in your final season, you tossed for 2,861 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions in 10 games. How are you feeling that final season, man? Because you played excellent.
I mean, to be honest, when I was in it, it was rough. I'm not gonna lie, because obviously the biggest thing for for a quarterback and a player is you want to win, right? And I feel like for me, my senior year was tough. Right before my senior year, we had 7 to 8 defensive starters that failed out of school or wasn't able to come back the next season. And it was tough. It was tough going into that season because the year before my junior year, we were 7-4, and the games we lost, was probably mostly because of COVID. Like we were 6-0 or 5-0 or whatever it was going into play Indiana Wesleyan, and we had like 4 or 5 key pieces that had COVID and that couldn't play. And so we were going into that my senior year like, this is our year. We're going to make the playoffs. We're going to make a deep run. And then right before the season, you lose, 7 of your studs, your guys, your defensive starters that you're just like, man, what it really does is it hurts the team. We also lost our best O lineman, one of our best O linemen right before the season. And that was killer. Things like that was just like, man, you're going in and you're just like, man, we the program's on the rise. We're getting better. 7-4 season, just missing the playoffs. And then going into your senior year, you're like, you lose all those guys, and it was devastating for that. And I feel like for me, like, numbers are great, but I think getting wins in the win column, means so much more. And so honestly, I'm so glad I have this opportunity where I'm at now, just because, where I came from at an NAIA school who, I did build a program, but again, my senior year was, 3-7 isn't a great record either. And so, for me, it was, I'm going to do the best that I can. You're right. I put up the stats, I put up the numbers, and I did well. But I think I'm a big team oriented guy, and not putting wins in the win column, definitely hurt. That's for sure.
Sure. And, football is a sport that's unique from other team sports because, it's have very individual niche jobs. And in baseball, you can hit 350 while the rest of your team's hitting 180. And in football,
exactly,
it's a sport way more affected by whether everybody else on your team is able to do their jobs. And so it's so hard to evaluate players across different teams when they're not having the pieces around them that they should or that they were expecting to.
Exactly. I highly agree. And I think, that's why everyone always says football is probably the best team sport ever, just because you need so many different, types of bodies, types of players. You have kickers, you have long snappers, you have O linemen, you have receivers who are super fast. You have your quarterbacks that can throw the ball and are super smart, like things like that. Like I always say, like, it's probably one of the best team sports ever, just because you need so many different kinds of pieces on a team. And it's really cool to be a part of, honestly. But you're 100% right. It can really affect, I look at my brother, for example, not having a good O-line. You're not going to be able to show how good you can throw the ball if you can't throw the ball. You know what I mean? So, stuff like that.
And so before we start to head into some of the stuff about the transition to professional football, people who aren't into all levels of football don't know that from the bottom of community college football to the group of 5 in Division I to all the different professional leagues out there is so much more talent in football and parity and competition than there used to be. NAIA,
there really is.
The NAIA and the JUCO products, they're putting players in the professional ranks, or they're putting players, in the transfer portal going to big Division I opportunities. And so if you could talk a little bit about what you found the level of competition to be and in an evolving sense, because you were in college sports for probably the most turbulent, weirdest time for anybody to be in college sports, in the period where the NIL and the transfer portal comes along. So, what was your experience in the evolving level of competition at the NAIA level?
Well, I would say it's just all across the board. I think the transfer portal is really helping out the D1 colleges, but it's also really hurting high school players. But what it is these smaller D2 NAIA D3 programs are getting a much higher class of high school athletes now. And I think, you're going to see throughout the years a big difference and a big difference in talent across all levels of college football, and I look at NAIA and I think NAIA is a very talented, a very talented, area of division of football. Like, I know Indiana Wesleyan from our league beat Butler, and they beat Valpo and things like that in the Division I level. So, I look at that and I'm like, we're right up there. And I think, I think there's talent across every level of football, and there's talented players everywhere. And I think with the transfer portal, you're going to see more talented players playing a D3 NAIA Division II type of ball just because of that transfer portal.
And there's so many guys out there, like we've talked about, and it's so hard to evaluate what a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid is going to be able to do in 2 to 3 years. Even you can't take into account, the work ethic they have and their capacity to improve. And so,
Exactly.
we're seeing more and more players from NAIA to the FCS that are able to, hang with guys that have been 4 or 5-star prospects for their entire high school careers.
Exactly. And I think another thing that's unprecedented for these younger guys too is like, for me, getting the opportunity to start for 5 years is a big deal. A lot of these D1 colleges bring in these guys and, they don't play till they're juniors or seniors, and having 5 years of experience, of game experience under your belt is really, honestly, like it's unparalleled to anything you'll ever get. Like playing in a game and getting that game experience is a huge for a development of a player, for sure.
And by the way, I'd love to have your brother Josh Kulka on here sometime. I'd love to talk to him too. And
of course.
So now to talk a little bit about the transition to the pro game, because I think we've probably been chatting back and forth for off and on for what probably seems like most of 2023, at least spring. And you were making the rounds. You were going to all the big combine, a lot that the XFL was doing. All the arena leagues in the United States have been, making greater efforts, I feel like, to reach out to potential prospects. And now obviously the USFL and the XFL looks like they're going to be merging, but the XFL kind of established itself as kind of like like the G League equivalent is kind of what they're like kind of moving.
Yeah.
And so, what was the experience of it now that you were done with college football, trying to find, people in the industry that can help you find these opportunities and making the rounds to some of these bigger combines, and just, it must have been a damn whirlwind, man, trying to go around all these places.
You have no idea. It was the biggest whirlwind. It was so crazy. I remember there was like 3 weeks left in my college season. I was like, man, I always wanted to play professional football. Ever since I was a little boy, I wanted to play professional sports. I loved hockey. I love football. I always just wanted to play professional sports. And so I was getting to my last 3 games of my college career, and I was like, man, I'm an NAIA quarterback. And, I was kind of like, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? Like, I don't know. And actually, it was funny because 3 weeks into 3 weeks before my season was over, I found a tryout for actually the Arizona Rattlers, the arena team. And I booked the tryout, and right after my season, like a week or two after, I actually went out to Arizona and tried out for the Arizona Rattlers. And then, my coach ended up getting me into a couple Senior Bowls and things like that. And so I went to the FAF Pro Dip Senior Bowl in New York. That was like kind of a D3 type of Senior Bowl. It was a really cool experience. And that's actually, that's where I met my agent. My agent found me there. Shout out to A&D Sports. And, he kind of found me there, and, he offered me and wanted to be my agent. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. And he really helped me with all the process of going through, sifting through, the arena teams that wanted to offer me, and going to which tryouts to go to, and getting me, in the CFL, I had five invites to go to tryouts, off of him and stuff like that. And so it was awesome meeting him. And then after that, it was a big deal to get invited to the FCS National Bowl. I don't know if you know what that is, in Daytona Beach, Florida. So that was a big one for me, getting the invite to that. And I went there and I turned some heads and made some good contacts, and from that, it ended up getting invited to the Tropical Bowl later on, and that's where I really turned heads. That's where I got some interest from Montreal and the CFL, and quite a few arena teams, and I got put in the paper of being the best quarterback at the Tropical Bowl and things like that. So kind of made some moves in that front as well, and then going to the National Scouting Combine, and the Chiefs were there, and they were super interested in stuff like that. So honestly, it was the biggest whirlwind ever. It was going to like so many things just happening all in a row. Of like, I was so busy, and I was always in some different city and different part of America, stuff like that, trying out for all these different teams and stuff like that. It was wild. I'm not gonna lie, it was a whirlwind.
And it's got to be, it's got to be so helpful to find someone like A&D who seems to really work for you,
Yeah,
to navigate this process. And you put in work making the rounds to all these different places where, at these bowl games, that's a certain level to where if those guys want to play professional football, they can get the opportunity if they can get the opportunity and get in front of the rest.
exactly.
And so it must have been crazy to where it's like, it's always been my dream to play professional football. And then you do a tryout and another one, another one. It's like, oh, people are actually very interested in having me play quarterback.
Right. Yeah. It was like, I can actually do this. I can make this happen.
That's got to be wild. And I remember when you first mentioned that the X League was kind of on your radar. And I was like, oh, that's super interesting because I love the take on all sports that Japan.
Yes.
And a lot of people don't know it. And, I'm sure it's something you found out early in the process that America, Canada, Mexico, and Japan are like the only 4 countries in the world that have established high school, college, professional football organizations. It's why, it's why the Euro teams are limited in the amount of players from those places that they can have. So what was it ultimately that attracted you to playing in the X League and playing for the Obic Seagulls?
So I had heard about the X League a couple of years back. So my coach, who was Corey Lockenaria, he played at University of Ball State, and he went from there. He got an opportunity to basically go to the X League and try out for a team called the Sagamihara Rise, who actually we just played 2 weeks ago. And when he tried out, he tore his ACL in the tryout. So that was tough. But after that, he came and coached us at Lawrence Tech. And he was telling me all about it and telling me like, yeah, like the money's great over there. Like it's not like your average European league. Not only that, the talent is unprecedented. It's very good and stuff like that. So I'd heard about it back then. And during the process of going through everything, I was going through tryouts at that point. I was getting ready for my pro day. I performed at Western Michigan's pro day and also Saginaw Valley State pro day in Michigan. And I was, going to these CFL tryouts. I had gone to Winnipeg, I had gone to Calgary. And so, and there was some interest there, and that's kind of what I was going. And then I actually was back in Michigan just training, getting ready for my next CFL tryout. And my agent hit me up and he's like, hey, are you interested in playing in Japan? And I was like, yeah, heck yeah, I heard a lot about it. I'm ready for any opportunity. Let's do it. And he's like, okay, well, I'll send your film. There's an opportunity that was posted or whatever. And I was like, okay. And so literally after that, they were like, oh, they really like you. They want to meet with you in 3 days. And so we hopped on a Zoom and, we had a little interview and they're like, okay, can you be here by next Friday? And I was like, what the heck? I've never been to Japan in my life. So yeah, I went out to the tryout, and I met with, basically in Japan, they do like a 2-week tryout for most of their American players. So each team has 4 American players, 2 on offense, 2 on defense. And they do like a 2-week tryout in the spring. So I came out and tried out. It was me and KJ Carter-Samuel from Colorado State. Good quarterback, even better person. Really nice to meet him. He was a super cool dude. And, we competed for the job and I ended up winning. It was, they kind of offered me and I was like, oh, well, I still have the NFL draft. I just finished my pro days and the Lions and the Commanders both said to stay by my phone after the draft, maybe getting a camp invite or something like that. And then, I had three CFL tryouts I was still planning on going to. And they were like, okay, well, we're offering you here you go. And then I ended up going back to America and they wanted to meet with me and my agent like a day after I got back. And they're like, okay, so we'll double your signing bonus if you, don't go to Canada. And I was like, all right, well, I mean, that's pretty good. And, I was like, money was a little bit better than, some of those CFL offers and things like that they were talking about. I was like, all right, well, if that's what you're offering, heck yeah, like I'll make that happen. That sounds amazing. But I still want the opportunity if an NFL team calls me to go to camp. And they were like, okay, well then we can do that. But can you be back here this Friday? And I was like, it was like a week. And I was like, man. And so they wanted me to come back. They flew me back out and I basically practiced with the team, started learning the offense more. And, they kind of kept it a secret from the media because, I wasn't officially signed yet. And then after the NFL draft, I ended up not getting the call, and I ended up signing the day after the draft. And I was very happy to be an Obic Seagull at that point. It was awesome.
And I remember that you kind of had to keep it on the hush at first.
Yes.
You knew what you were going to be. And, that is crazy too, because that's the thing about, those NFL camp invites, man. It's like, obviously, that is what people in their mind dream of when they're talking about,
yes.
professional quarterback. But at the same time, man, there are so many guys that they're filtering through. You might, that opportunity could be over for some people, whether they lost it on their own or not. You can perform
exactly
admirably, and doing your job, but they might just be looking to go in another direction. And especially when it gets down to the practice squads and the third stringers, I think NFL teams just have an extremely short attention span.
Yes, I agree. And from what I was hearing it was more of just a camp invite, more than like an actual, shot at, being an actual player on the team or getting an actual chance to play. And then also I had heard that it also might have been because they heard I was in Japan and they didn't want to pay for the $3,000 flight for me to come out to camp. But, maybe that's not true. Maybe it is, but that's what I had heard from some people. So,
well, what are you going to do, man? And,
hey,
it gives you the opportunity to get a real full season of work in, which,
right.
When there's so many quarterbacks and people every year just want to get their hands on as many of the talented quarterbacks and, on their camp as possible, that,
exactly.
If you have a year where you're not playing, you really run the risk of being forgotten about.
Exactly. And that's why I say this is the biggest blessing in the world. I'm playing in a very talented league. I'm still playing outside, and, I'm very blessed. I'm part of a really great organization here in Obic. Honestly, like our first two, like you feel like a superstar after the game. Yeah, I probably had, tons and tons of fans want my autograph and stuff like that. It was the coolest thing in the world. I wouldn't trade it for the world. And it's so much fun. It's an experience that I never thought that I would get, coming to a different country like this, playing a sport that I love. And, it's an opportunity to still play. I know a lot of people that I went to these bowl games with, and a lot of these quarterbacks that are, sitting on the couch still begging for an opportunity right now. And, I'm blessed to actually have an opportunity. I'm very blessed.
And, the same goes for a lot of the Euro guys. They took an opportunity.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's kind of that ground floor thing. You're getting in a league where, the prominence is rising.
Yep.
And, so what has this actual transition to living in Japan been like? Because that's got to be, after all this crazy stuff, now you're living in Japan. It's got to be nuts. And the fanfare, I'm interested to hear, what the football culture and the fan culture is, because, as this is primarily an MMA podcast where I love to dabble in alternative football, the Japanese MMA fans are, very different, and the pageantry and the showmanship that they bring to the sport has always been something that I've loved.
Yes. So I would say we'll start with living in Japan. The transition was, everything's so compact. Everyone's so close together. I'm in Tokyo right now. And it's just, there's a lot of people, that's for sure. And I love it. It's a lot of fun. And I would say another big thing is the food, coming here in Japan, there's not a lot of processed food and things like that here. And it's crazy. I go back to America and I gain about 5 to 10 pounds. And then I come back here to Japan and I lose 5 to 10 pounds. It's crazy. And I eat more here in Japan than I do back in America. It's kind of funny. But I would say, the biggest difference here is obviously there's a language barrier. And that can be tough sometimes, but the people are just awesome. It's very safe here. I go travel on the train and there's, 7, 8-year-olds on the train traveling by themselves. And that's how safe this country really is. It's awesome to see. It really is. And then the pageantry with fans, it's actually kind of crazy with football. So during the season, you don't get like a ton of fans during the regular season, but once playoffs hit and then you get to the championship game, like the championship game has around 40,000 fans there every year.
Wow.
Like it's pretty big. Like it's really big. And then you go through the regular season, it's not really that way. You may get 5,000 to 10,000 fans, something like that in that range. Something like that. But then once you get to the Rice Bowl and the championship, it's unreal. It's 40,000 fans, and it's in a huge baseball stadium and stuff like that. And playoffs is big too. You play in big baseball stadiums when you get to the playoffs and stuff like that. So yeah, it gets definitely pretty big. The fandom is pretty crazy over here.
Damn, that is wild. And so,
Yeah.
what do you think is the difference? Because obviously, there's got to be more of the homegrown talent in some of these leagues and on some of these teams, and in the coaching as well. So, what have you found are some of the differences, if there are any, between the style of football that you played up to this point and the style that they're playing over in Japan right now? And to that point as well, where do you think are the areas in football that the Japanese homegrown talent is excelling in the most right now?
I would say fundamentals. It's a lot like baseball. It's a lot like baseball. A lot of people talk about baseball and baseball in America and baseball in Japan. And, Japan just beat America in the World Games or whatever. And I honestly, it's fundamentals. Their fundamentals they have a lot of attention to detail. They do the little things right. Where they're going to make their breaks on certain routes, not dropping the football, like things like that is unprecedented here. Like the fundamentals are very, very important. And I think towards like America, you may have America, a lot of the training is explosiveness, being strong, being super fast. Things like that is very prevalent in America. But in Japan, the fundamentals are more focused on. So I think like, honestly, any athlete, any American player would benefit from coming to Japan just because of you see how important the fundamentals of the sport are. And for me, I've seen a lot of like doing the little things right in my drop, in how I throw a football and stuff like that. Like it's crazy to see. And honestly, I feel like I've become a better quarterback just because refocusing on all the fundamentals and just instead of just focusing on being accurate, having a good arm and trying to get faster. It's really cool, honestly.
And I've said this before when talking to some other alternative football personalities that
Yeah.
we've seen offensive linemen from Samoa and from Polynesia be in a lot of that Pacific Island area. We've seen them have success for years. Why the Japanese prospect talent pool of sumo wrestlers cannot be tapped for offensive lineman potential? It sounds crazy when I even say it, but I seriously don't see why there could be any reason why that couldn't happen in the future.
Well, I mean, to be honest, the biggest story right now in Japan is there's a player that just came over who was a professional sumo wrestler champion that is now playing, I believe it's Arizona State or some college, some D1 college. He got a full ride scholarship and he's playing football. So when I first got here, that was the big story in Japan. And we actually, he was practicing with Fujitsu at the time, which is another big. The top three teams over here in Japan are Fujitsu, Panasonic, and then Obic. Those are your top three teams here in Japan. And then IBM is also up there too. But he was practicing with Fujitsu, getting ready to go to play in America or whatever. And so, he actually it might have been Colorado State or something like that. But we practiced against him, and I was like, oh man, he could be pretty good talent here. Like this could be. So I feel like maybe that's what they're starting to tap into, that little potential of the sumo wrestlers. So that's cool.
And it's
that you say that.
It's marketable as hell, dude, because those sumo wrestlers are stars. They have celebrity potential and they market themselves fantastically.
Oh yeah, they do. Exactly. So I'm interested to see. I mean, he's obviously, I think he just got over there going into this fall season for camp or whatever. So I'm interested to see how he continues, how his career goes over in the States.
And so at this point, how, and it's so hard. I wish I could watch more full Japanese college and Japanese pro games. The thing is, man, I go to the websites and everything's in Japanese and it's it's very tough to do. But how would you evaluate your time with the Obic Seagulls so far? How do you think your time there is progressing?
I love it. I mean, I've been enjoying my time here. I think the team is awesome. And, I think, and the GM keeps telling me I get better and better every game. And so, we run a very complex offense over here right now, and it's a lot of fun to do. But the players are awesome. They're just great guys. We have a great team, a great bond for sure. And I think, and right now we're 3-0 and we're playing really well. And, I'm excited, hopefully we can keep things going and go win the Rice Bowl. I mean, I'm loving this team. I'm loving the camaraderie and how close we all are. And I really think that we can make a run for a championship this year.
And folks, just in case you want to check this out too, the fella's name that we were discussing is Hidetora Hanada. He is a defensive lineman at Colorado State currently, and he is a grand champion at 6'1", 280 pounds. That is amazing.
God, there you go.
That's phenomenal. Well, Tyler, we have had a fantastic conversation about everything that's going on really in the world of football right now. At this point, if there is anything else that you want to say, anybody you want to shout out, the floor is yours.
I would just say shout out all the people that believed in me. I coming from an NAIA school and, not really knowing, what could come from being a professional athlete and stuff like that. It was my dream, obviously, but, I think, I have to shout out the people that, believed in me. Like, A&D Sports is a big one. They believed in me and they were able to give me this opportunity, and they still believe in me. There's still the opportunity, to stay here for a long time, but also, the XFL, USFL merger and things like that. I'm ready for any opportunity that comes my way. And then, I'd have to say my family, my mom, my dad, who, have always supported me through everything. My brothers and my sisters, they're awesome. And, I would say I have to shout out my girlfriend a little bit. She misses me, being over in America, being, 6,000 miles away for 6 months is a long time. So love her, love you. But, I would say, I would shout out my coaches in college who believed in me too. My head coach, Avant Mitchell, was able to get me to a lot of these bowl games and get me a lot of these opportunities that, not a lot of quarterbacks, not a lot of players get. And so, I'm really blessed for him. I'm really blessed for my offensive coordinator, his family, and always showing me support and love. And so I would say those are the people that I would shout out. And then I would say, for any high school and low division college athlete, if you want it, you can do it. And it all comes down to how much you really want it, and how much effort and time you want to put into achieving all of your dreams. But from a guy like me who went to an NAIA school and did it, you can do it too.
Folks, this has been Tyler Kulka of Lawrence Technological University and of the Obic Seagulls. You can follow him on Twitter at tkulk17 and on Instagram at tylerkulka17. Thank you so much to Tyler for being here. I'd love to have you back on. I can't wait to continue following your career in the professional ranks. Folks, this has been another interlude episode of RotoBallers' official MMA podcast, Tap That, where we love to dig in and dabble on the alternative football scene. Follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. Follow the podcast on Facebook, Spotify, and YouTube at Tap That MMA Podcast. Thanks for listening, folks. Have yourselves a great night and peace.